So, if you've ever looked at your bank account balance and thought, this should still feel like enough, but then every time you think about money, there's this feeling in the pit of your stomach that's making you feel stressed and worried with money, you are certainly not alone. The very reason that you can often feel broke, even when you have money, has nothing to do with the actual money itself and everything to do with how your body, how your nervous system actually processes the feeling of safety. Your brain doesn't just evaluate financial security based on numbers and spreadsheets. It actually evaluates everything based on the emotional patterns that you have learned in your body to experience. So, for example, if you grew up hearing, we can't afford that, or watching your parents stress around money, then your whole nervous system has been encoded into those feelings of scarcity and that those patterns are normal, right? So even when you are financially resourced as an adult, your body is still carrying those early experiences, those early imprints of this feeling of not enough. And so the logical mind knows I'm going to be fine, but the nervous system is still operating from those old programs, scanning constantly for the next financial threat or the next financial risk and never really quite believing that what you actually have is enough. And this is why more money doesn't automatically create more peace, because the feeling of enoughness isn't determined by the numbers in your bank account. It's determined by what your body has been trained to recognize as safe. So today I'm going to be sharing with you a 10-minute practice that completely rewired my relationship with worthiness and enoughness, and why your nervous system, not your mind, actually holds the key to feeling more financial security. Now, last week on this podcast, or if you're watching me on YouTube, was the very first episode in this brand new series called Breaking Money Cycles. And in the session we did last week, last Monday, we talked about the 3 money zone model. And the 3 money zones were how safe you feel to receive money, how worthy you feel to hold on to money through things like savings balances and accumulating wealth. And the 3rd zone is your ability to feel safe to give. And when we get stuck in one of those loops, each zone gets completely hijacked in a very specific way. So if you haven't had a chance yet to watch or listen to episode 1 in the series, please go back and have a listen to that now. It will really provide you with some strong foundations to what we're going to be talking about in this video today. And if you did listen to that episode or watch the video, then here's what probably happened. You've probably tried to think your way out of it, right? Maybe you've made some mental notes about challenging those money beliefs. Maybe you even wrote down some new financial goals. And then maybe you got to Wednesday and you were right back to deflecting compliments, feeling anxious about spending money that you can actually afford to spend. Or maybe there's some other sabotaging patterns, because we can't think our way into feeling worthy and feeling abundant. We can't logic our way out of scarcity. You can't force yourself to believe that you deserve more by simply just saying things like, I am worthy of wealth. It is safe for me to have money. Like, the affirmation side come from a logical place, not from an embodiment place. And so if your body is still feeling contracted by fear and your nervous system is responding to that, then we have to really dive into the emotional lens. Like, what is the emotional experience that we are having in our bodies, and how do we shift that, right? So I'm going to be sharing today my complete 10-minute practice that I've been using now for a number of years, and that's really helped me to go from quite temporary money belief shifting. Maybe it will last a week or so, or maybe a couple of weeks or a few months, but it's not long lasting. It's not actually moving it through the emotional spectrum. So I'm going to be sharing that with you in this episode today. And there's a bunch of resources I'm also going to be sharing with you as well. And this isn't just about like positive thinking or pretending that you have more than you do. It's really about training your whole body to recognize and to receive enough when it shows up. Because the truth is, it isn't about the money, right? Someone wrote a great book about that. The truth is that you already have enough. You already are enough from a worthiness perspective. Financially, there may be some milestones that you want to reach, but we have to get into this place of actually feeling worthy of receiving money, feeling worthy of holding on to savings balances without spending them, and feeling worthy to accumulate and to share our wealth, collectively, without this feeling that I've got to stockpile and hoard this in case it runs out, And very often it's our nervous systems, our bodies that just haven't been trained to experience this. And if you remember from last week's episode, I was talking to you about my experience of when I almost lost my son and how this kind of real terror of being very unprepared left me in this place of feeling unworthy. And in 2018, which was around like 5 years after Thomas was born, I was having one of my best financial years in my business. On paper, everything looked great. I was making lots of money. I was making good investments. I had a great team. I was outsourcing. I was busy. I was really enjoying my work. And on paper, it looked like a healthy business. It was growing. I was accumulating. But inside my body, I was still this mom that was working out these worst case scenarios, except that rather than being in the medical emergencies, as I explained in last week's episode with my son, I was actually worrying about how long is my business going to survive if there was a recession? How long would my savings last if I lost all my clients? And I realized that I was still in this cycle of needing to address not just what I was thinking about money, but what my body was experiencing. And so I started experimenting. And I started asking myself, what if instead of trying to think my way out of this pattern, I could feel my way into this vision, this place I wanted to move towards? What if I could train my body to actually recognize abundance in the same way that I trained to recognize threats and dangers? And over this period, I had been practicing lots of emotional freedom technique. I qualified as an EFT practitioner 5 years ago, and I started to really use emotional freedom technique to release all of the stored, trapped emotions that actually I hadn't really allowed myself to feel, right? Because growing up, the environment that we were accustomed to was about, kind of like suck it up, move on. It was like, just forget about it. And that created this experience in my body where I didn't even give myself permission to feel anger or shame or guilt. I would just like push it down, push it down, push it down. And actually, when I went on one of my very first embodiment retreats, I released a lot of stored emotion. This was before I became an EFT practitioner. And I actually ended up in hospital with a 10 centimeter abscess in my pelvis because my body wasn't prepared to suddenly expel and release all of this trapped emotion. And I ended up in hospital. I ended up with sepsis. I was very, very poorly. And then my body started to say to itself, well, it's not safe for you to release emotion, right? Because this is what happens when you do. I told you should have just like pushed it down, pushed it away, ignored it. So the embodiment emotional experience for me was quite raw. It was quite unsafe. And then when I trained in emotional freedom technique, I learned how to very safely release the stored energy in my body. And emotional freedom technique, otherwise known as tapping, is where you tap on various meridian points in the body. And it is a really beautiful experience. It's something that we teach in our programs because it is a really beautiful way, not just around money, but around just allowing your body to process and bring up and release any of those negative emotions. And then through other modalities, we can then start to re-imprint new positive beliefs. So I trained in something called matrix re-imprinting. I also trained in inherited money, trauma, and a few other modalities. That was my learning year in numerology. And so I would just heavily invested lots of my time in learning these things. And that really helped. It really, really helped. But what I also then found over a few years leading to maybe like 18 months ago is that I always ended up becoming quite addicted to healing myself. And I see this a lot in the online space, is that people can get trapped in these cycles of there's something wrong with me, there's more healing work to do. And we actually get trapped in victim mode. And I recognize that in myself. And so I really wanted to find some way of moving myself out of this victim pattern and into this place of empowerment and more uplifting, positive emotional states. And so I came across a body of work called Heart Math and the Heart Math Institute. And it really opened up my eyes to the power of the heart in the body. And it was quite serendipitous that the year I found this work was also the year that I had a tattoo when I was on a Virgin trip with some entrepreneurs. I was on this lovely cruise with the Virgin line. Actually, I think it was the second sailing of this particular ship. It was beautiful. And we had the best time. And I had this very impulsive decision to get this tattoo done. I don't really know why I made this decision. I just had this feeling in my body that I needed to get this tattoo. And the word love came up and I had it tattooed on my wrist. And I was really in this feeling of feeling so connected into my heart space and into love. I was also learning a lot about gene keys and my gene keys, and the word love again was showing up a lot in that. And so I just started this heart breathing process. This is a process that we teach in our financial coach certification, in our financial coaching tools program. And honestly, out of everything I have learned, I would say this has been one of the most powerful practices, even more powerful than emotional freedom technique. And I've kind of ended up creating my own version of this by using various different modalities and kind of weaving them all together. And I wanted to share this with you today. And this 10-minute daily practice really helped me to rewire my relationship with feeling safe to experience these emotions in my body. And I would say, like, even after just a month, I was making decisions from a completely different place, not from fear, not from grasping, but from trust and clarity and compassion. And when I stopped operating from this place of unworthiness, I stopped making unworthy based decisions because I felt so much love and compassion, even of the decisions I have made in the past, right? I was really releasing that guilt and that shame. So let me first of all tell you a little bit about what wasn't working for me as well, because I think it's important in this context, because the chances are you've probably tried some of these things as well. And maybe you have tried some of the very traditional abundance practices like visualizing things through vision boards. Maybe you've been through a magazine process of cutting out your images and putting your dream destinations and some of your goals on your boards. Maybe you've done some guided meditations where you've imagined yourself as this wealthy person. Maybe you have tried affirmations about deserving more abundance. And the thing that I've found is that they do work temporarily, and certainly the way that you learn is important, you know, whether you're auditory or kinesthetic or visual in your learning. But what I found is that even trying all of those different things, they were quite temporary. And I'd feel inspired for a day, maybe even a week, but then the old anxiety would creep back in, sometimes much stronger than before. And what I didn't understand at that point is that I was trying to convince my mind that I was abundant, but my body was still contracted in these scarcity patterns. So it's like trying to feel confident about like public speaking whilst your hands are shaking and your voice is trembling, because the body always wins, and your nervous system doesn't care what pictures you put on your vision board if every cell in your body is still vibrating with this emotional experience of not enoughness. Then the visualization becomes just another wishful thinking, right? It's a disconnection between the mind and the body, the lived reality. And so your unconscious mind doesn't process images, it processes feelings and sensations. So when you imagine having more money, but your body feels the same fear, then you're actually just reinforcing that scarcity pattern. And so the body is constantly trying to show you and broadcast the real beliefs that you have around money. And many people ignore them because they don't know how to sit in that space of feeling everything in their body. And real abundance, feeling worthiness around money is a felt experience. And when you can genuinely feel that, your breath deepens, your shoulders relax, you take up more space, you move more slowly, very deliberately. There's this real ease and flow when you're in this uncontracted presence. Your body's not feeling contracted. Okay, so let me take you into this very short practice. Now, if you're listening to this while you're driving, you can still participate, but obviously don't close your eyes. I have also popped you a link in the show notes or down below this video, or you can grab it at themoneypanel.co.uk/breaking money cycles. All of the resources that I'm sharing from all of this series are going to be gathered over a number of weeks onto that page. So themoneypanel.co.uk/breaking money cycles is where you can find those resources. So if you want to maybe just tune in to me for a few minutes while I'm doing this live with you, but you want to actually take some more time and spaciousness to take this a little bit deeper, then you can grab a guided version on that link. I've got some lovely music behind it as well. So it's a lovely practice that you can do over and over again in the comfort of your own home. Okay. So if you are listening to this right now, you can do this with your eyes open, or you can close down your eyes. And I just want you to really bring attention into your heart space, into the center of your chest. And I really like to place my left hand onto my heart with my right hand over the top. The left hand is the closest arm, if you like, the closest energy point to the heart. And you can simply just notice your breath. Notice your breath as you're breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just take a moment to notice your heart. And you can imagine perhaps if your heart was to have many sides as it does, you can imagine the front and the back of the heart, the sides of the heart. And as you imagine your breath going in and out, you can imagine the flow of that energy and oxygen going in and out of your heart. Imagine the whole of your heart breathing slowly and gently. And you can just sit in this lovely space where you just continue to breathe in and out through the heart space. And the next part of this process is to bring into your heart space a moment when you felt love, appreciation, or gratitude. And this might be this present moment, It may be a very special day in your life. It may be time spent with a pet or in a particular location. But really trust what your body is allowing you to remember. And so each time you do this exercise, you will have a different experience. And as you bring that memory into your heart space, you can start to bring in all of the different senses. So you can bring in visually how that is represented to the heart space in this moment. What are you seeing in that experience? What are you hearing in that experience? What are the sounds? What are you smelling in that experience? Maybe it's the freshly cut grass or the smell of a particular perfume or aftershave. Maybe it's the smell of the sea. And what are you hearing in that experience? Maybe it's the sound of laughter or the crashing of the waves. Maybe it's a very quiet moment. And as you begin to bring in all of those different senses through what you see, what you hear, what you smell, you can bring in that feeling into the body. All of that love, appreciation, and gratitude. And you can imagine that this flow of love and appreciation and gratitude is coming into the heart. And then as your heart is beating, it's beating it and pumping it through every single cell of your body. You can perhaps bring a color of that feeling into the body. And you can imagine that that is flowing all the way up through from the heart, up through the shoulders and up through your neck and into your face and all the way through your jaw and into your eyes and up through your head. And then all the way back down the head, down the spine, through your shoulder blades, down your back, all the way down into your hips and the pelvis and all the way down through the tummy. And then all the way down in from the top of the legs, all the way down the legs into the knees and down from the knees into the lower part of your ankles. And from the ankles all the way through to the tip of your toes and all the way into the earth and into the center of the earth where you're feeling so safe and grounded. And I like to allow my body to maybe move in the way that it wants to experience this feeling. I often find my body sort of gently rocking from side to side as that energy sort of moving all the way through the body. And then I also like to bring in a lovely smile into my face to allow your nervous system and your body to re-experience this feeling of love and appreciation and gratitude. And you can hold yourself in that moment for as long as you wish. Even if you have 2 or 3 minutes, this is a great exercise to do as well if you're dashing between meetings and you just want to take a moment to re-regulate the nervous system and to remind yourself that you get to create this new emotional state. And it's such a lovely practice. And when you're ready and you've completed that, you can just bring your attention back to your breath and you can open your eyes again if you have them closed. And this is also just as powerful to have your eyes open, because if you are in a position perhaps where it wouldn't be right to close your eyes. Maybe you're driving and feeling stressed by the traffic on the road, or you're flying and you're getting a bit nervous. You can use this exercise in any situation where your body is in need of just being reminded that you get to create this emotional shift in your body. You don't need external validation. You don't need an external experience to help you feel happy and safe and joy and love. We get to create this for ourselves. And this is one of the things I love about this work, is that, other people can have their own decisions and their own opinions, and they can have their own experience. And we get to change that for ourselves. We get to choose, how we show up in the world and how we feel around money and how we feel about ourselves. So this embodiment practice is something that I would really love for you to use. Download the guided version on the resources that I've shared with you, the moneypanel.co.uk/breaking money cycles, and use this with yourself. Commit to using this practice for the next 30 days, 60 days. And there is an extra part to this in the guided visualization that I'll share with you in this recording that you can download, where we can actually then start to move this feeling into the future and then start to visualize what are some of those goals and things that we want to experience. And what we're doing here is we're essentially just training your body to feel good, right? We're training your body to feel this lived experience. This becomes your new decision-making compass. So when your body feels worried or anxious, you can make that shift, right? And what this looks like in practice is that when you're operating from these places where emotions are contracting in the body, then you might find yourself making decisions that are based on scarcity. So you might say yes to work that pays less because you're anxious about saying no, avoiding looking at your bank account balance completely, making impulsive decisions maybe because there's this almost like self-soothing going on, or over-researching investment options but never actually investing because nothing feels safe enough, or maybe undercharging for your services. We're going to talk more about undercharging in next week's episode, because maybe asking for more triggers shame. But when you're in that real place of compassion and love of yourself, then we get to make different decisions. We're feeling calmer. We can have calmer, clearer conversations about money. We can make investment decisions from a place of strategy rather than emotion, spending money on things that align with your values without this guilt spiral. Pricing your services based on value rather than fear of rejection. Actually opening your bank account app because you're curious rather than terrified. So before any financial decisions this week, whether it's checking the bank balance, having a money conversation, making a purchase, just take 2 minutes to do this heart breathing practice and notice the difference. When your body feels worthy, you'll find yourself naturally just making choices that create more abundance rather than perpetuating this scarcity loop, right? So I want you to try that this week, and I want you to ask yourself 3 questions, right? What would I choose if I was feeling contracted and scared right now? What would I choose if I was feeling abundant and trusting of myself right now? And which of those choices aligns with where I want to go, not where I have been? Right? The goal isn't to force yourself into these decisions. It's to become aware of the difference. Awareness is the very first step to choice, and choice is the very first step to lasting change. And so every day that you practice this embodiment, then you're literally going to rewire your default state, your default emotional state. Right? It's so, so powerful. And the beautiful thing about this work as well is that as you're body gets more comfortable with this feeling, then you start noticing opportunities that maybe you couldn't even see before. And not because you weren't there, but because your nervous system has been so focused on threats that it's filtered out anything that actually looked like a good opportunity. And when your body feels safe, your brain starts looking for evidence, of more evidence. Okay, so you'll notice more love, more compassion, more trust of yourself in all areas of your life, not just around money. So here is your homework. So take the 5 hidden money beliefs, the 3-zone check that I talked about in last week's episode at themoneypanel.co.uk/beliefs. This is going to show you where those patterns are driving your language choices and keeping you stuck. Then I want you to try the heart breathing practice, right? And I want you to try it every day this week. Right? Drop me a message and let me know how you're getting on with this. You can download the full guided version of this at themoneypanel.co.uk/breaking money cycles. And next week, we're going to dive into the patterns of undercharging and under-earning. Right? Why does this happen and how to overcome this particular money pattern? And remember, if we change the feeling first, the numbers will follow. I'll see you next week for episode 3 in the Breaking Money Cycles series. Thanks so much for listening.